Hello everyone, and welcome to tonight's meeting of Wharfdale Naturalists. I hope you can all hear me okay. Just before I introduce tonight's speaker, which I'm very much looking forward to doing, I just wanted to run through the drill. For those of you who don't know it, I'm sure there's hardly anybody left who doesn't, but you never know, you never know. So after our speaker has spoken, there will be a chance for you to pose questions. What we'd like you to do, if questions occur to you during the talk, is to put them into the Q&A, please, because that will give Jeff a chance to collate them, put them in a sensible order, and ask them in a sensible order. So if things do occur to you, please put them in the Q&A. You'll see the button that says Q&A, hopefully down at the bottom of your Zoom screen there. Thanks once again, I have to say, to Anne for those incredible photographs. The one of the weevil, absolutely astounding. That I don't know if that's the kind of weevil that you get in flower, is it? But the thought that those look like Anne's photo is quite alarming. Absolutely fantastic, Anne. So thank you very much for providing those for us. It's a real joy at the start of these meetings to be able to look at those pictures. But we're going to be looking at some more wonderful pictures tonight because our speaker tonight is a photographer. He's Richard Greenwood. He's local, so I expect some of you will already know him. He's a nature and wildlife photographer based in Burley and Wharfdale. He's a regular attender, I believe, of the Sun Lane working parties, so I expect some of you will know him from there. He's always been interested in wildlife and especially birds, but I think his interest really took off, he says, when he first got given a digital SLR for his 40th birthday. He coupled that with a zoom lens, and together it really kick-started his huge interest in photography. He's a very, very accomplished photographer, as shown by the fact that he's had some images shortlisted in the British Wildlife Photography Awards, and we all know how competitive those competitions are. So that's a real credit to you, Richard, that you've had that accomplishment. Also, one of his images has been used in a field guide published by the BTO. His main interest remains birds, especially birds of prey, but he's also interested in marine life, particularly marine mammals. He's been a scuba diver since the age of 18, so he's actually been able to get down there and have a look at what's going on beneath the surface of the water. He says he's definitely not an underwater photographer, but there's still time, Richard. There's still time. Okay, well, I will leave my introduction there, because it's you that's really got the most important things to tell us and to show us. And the talk is entitled, "If You Go Down to the Woods Today, Photography in the Boreal Forests of Finland." Over to you, Richard.
Thanks, Helen. Good evening, everybody. Now, you'll have to bear with me because this is my first appearance as a public speaker, so I'm still getting used to Zoom and technology, so let's go. So, as Helen says, I started my interest in wildlife photography when I was given that first camera for my 40th birthday. I'm entirely self-taught as a photographer, and having looked at local wildlife, I decided that I needed a little bit of a challenge. And back in 2017, a chance encounter at Bird Fair led me to visiting Finland the following year. To see what I could see in the boreal forests over there. So June 2018 saw me flying from Manchester to Helsinki, spending an overnight stop in Helsinki, and then taking a further flight from Helsinki, an extra hour and a half north to a little regional airport called Kahani, which is just at the junction of those two roads there, and then a further hour and a half road trip to the pin on the right hand side took me to a area called Latani. Just to put the location in context, where the Google pin is, it's actually 300 kilometers from the Arctic Circle, and the land to the right of the black line, which is only 3 kilometers from the Google pin, is actually Russia. So way north, way in the middle of actually nowhere. There are more trees than people and cars. I don't think on the route from the airport to the centre I saw more than 2 cars on the road, but for some reason the roads were absolutely brilliant. And another thing is we were actually getting better mobile phone coverage in that area than we tended to do in certain areas around Ilkley. Don't forget. So the centre, the flight from Helsinki to Kahani was an interesting one. This was my mode of transport for that short flight, a very small propeller-driven plane. But eventually we ended up at the centre in the middle of the forest. It was absolutely stunning, wooden building on the edge of a lake. The wooden platform there is where you run when you jump out of the sauna. Unfortunately, I didn't have the opportunity to partake in the sauna, but the lake appeared very, very cold. And there's another view of the lake as we were from the centre. Like I say, more trees than people. It's absolutely stunning landscape. Lots of lakes, lots of trees, lots of forests, as I say. Now I'm going to start sharing some of the images from that trip. Some of the first few images are actually probably very familiar to everybody around here in Ilkley. The centre had a hide where they used to put nuts and seeds out for the local forest birds. And the first bird that I saw, believe it or not, was a bullfinch, and that was visiting and feeding on the seeds. But we also got great spotted woodpecker, also very regular visitors, and greenfinches, which also came to the centre feeders. It wasn't just birds that came. The local mammals were very photogenic. And we got the red squirrels coming in. These were absolutely beautiful. And as I say, very photogenic. It was a time of year when the squirrels were getting their ear tufts, so it just made for great photo opportunities. Now, obviously we get bullfinches, we get greenfinches, we get woodpeckers. Not so much the red squirrels. They're more up in the dales, but we still see them locally. Now, one of the birds that we don't see locally, which was a first for me, was the crested tit. This was the one and only crested tit I saw all week. Again, came into the feeder area, but it was a stunning little bird. That I saw. The other thing that was around the centre were the crossbills. Now, lots of flocks of crossbills. This was a beautiful male that was in the tree just outside the accommodation. The accommodation at the time, back in 2018, we're actually having some extra rooms built, and so there were lots of breeze block areas down and building, and we witnessed some very interesting behaviour. This crossbill was actually down on the building area, picking up the grit and sand and swallowing it and using it as a bit of a digestion aid, we presume, for the seed to digest its seed. So quite interesting behaviour that we saw there. But lots of crossbills around the centre. Excuse me. something that we see now, and they're starting to come into to Ilkley and Burley and the surrounding area, is redwings. We get lots of those over winter. It was quite interesting to see them in their normal breeding range, their summer range. And this redwing was actually full on singing, which is something that I've never heard before. A beautiful little song whilst it's in its breeding range and nesting range. Another shot of a redwing there that was in the pine forest. Now, the next slide that I'm going to include is possibly not the best shot that I took during that trip, but it's something that we as Yorkshire wildlife enthusiasts will probably never see. And that is redwing and fieldfare fledglings. Like I say, this was in the breeding season, the nesting season, so there were a lot of fledglings around, both of redwing and fieldfare. The other bird that we were in the breeding range for, and the next shot is a shot that I actually took at the end of my street, not Finland, and I'll explain the context in a minute. Whilst I was in Finland, I saw one of these, and that's a waxwing. The area in Finland where we were is in its breeding area, and I saw one waxwing the whole week that I was there. I've actually seen more waxwings in Ilkley and Burley than I did in Finland in their normal breeding range. So yeah, interesting. Whilst I was sat one night, I heard this haunting call come flying over, and a flock of 7 birds flew over the hide that I was in. Looked like curlews, but when one landed, it turned out to be a whimbrel, which was a first for me at the time. I have seen them since, but it was first for me at the time. Came in and sat in front of the hide that I was in, started feeding, which was interesting. The other thing that we saw was goldeneye. Again, this is in the breeding area of this particular species. There was a goldeneye nest just outside the accommodation. We didn't actually see any fledglings. Apparently, the birds fledged just a few days before I arrived. The normal fledgling of a goldeneye throws itself out of the tree and down onto the ground. But this was a beautiful female goldeneye that turned up on the lake in front of one of the hides that I was in one evening. Another nice shot of the goldeneye. It wasn't all birds and larger mammals, as we'll come on to later, but I found this argent and sable moth one evening, which is something that we don't get in the local area. They're quite a rare visitor to the UK, more common in the area of Europe that I was in. As well, there was reptiles. We saw found this common frog just hopping through the undergrowth one day. I did go out away from the centre into the forest under the using the services of another local guide. This is the forest that she took me into, in the middle of, well, it's in the middle of nowhere really. It's a huge pine forest. Unfortunately, I had to contend with the other residents of the forest, so we were kitted out as appropriately. There were, at the time of year, there were lots of mosquitoes, but I feel it was worth it in the end, as the guide led us to a tree, and in that tree was a bird, nicely hidden, but eventually it came out and we got some spectacular views, albeit looking the other way initially. But the owl came out, and it turned out to be the great grey owl, which was another first for me, an absolutely fantastic opportunity to see it. Unfortunately, it didn't do very much. It just popped out of its hole in the tree and just sat there and looked half asleep. Didn't look particularly interested in the few of us that were stood some way away photographing it, but it was a spectacular sight. As I say, just didn't do much. This forest where we were in as well, it was a site of red-flanked bluetail, which is another bird that's turned up recently on the Yorkshire coast. Again, the forest was so thick that we only ever heard it, didn't see it. It was just a herd-only species on the day. We were there mainly to photograph this owl. So onto the main event. We were there for one reason really, or I was there for one reason really. The centre has a number of these hides to photograph. The main reason why we were there. Now, I don't know if any of my normal contacts are on the call this evening, but those that do know me and my photography, my particular style of photography is that I tend to shy away from hides where food is placed out for subjects. I prefer a more natural approach to my wildlife photography. Having said that, for reasons that will become apparent in a few slides' time, this was the only way to see the subject that we were here to see. Small amounts of food were placed around the area for these particular subjects. Having said that, for the first 2 nights that I was in a hide, I didn't actually see anything that I was there to see. Very, very elusive. The hides that are there are there are about 30, offering different opportunities, different style of photograph that you can take. Usually one or two person hides. Each hide has a bunk bed, sleeping bags, the ability to place gimbal heads on for long lenses, and they were actually very, very comfortable. This is a wider shot of the number of hides that there are. The hides here are overlooking a lake, and so this is a view from one of the hides. If any of you were on the webinar a couple of weeks ago with Steve Race, he will have said about Shetland being very, very light, and I think this photograph was actually taken at about 2:30 in the morning. It was really light. We got probably no more than an hour or so of darkness at this time in June. It was nearly 24 hours of the sunlight. Some of the hides have low-level openings, so this is just a shot that I took of the landscape, just of the cotton grass that was in bloom. It was a low-level shot, again taken very early in the morning, but again full sunshine really. Every now and again, the sun did dip down below well, nearly down below the horizon, so we did get some spectacular sunsets with the clouds. But we were here to look for one thing, and the evidence was there that they were around. So here we go. This was what we were here to see, and it's this fella and this creature, which is the European brown bear. So the bare necessities. So the European population of brown bear is around about 50,000 individuals. They are spread mainly over Eastern Europe. The biggest population is across the Russian-Finland border, but there are also pockets in Eastern Europe, around Romania, Croatia, small pockets in the Pyrenees. Unfortunately, they are hunted in Eastern Europe every now and again. Occasionally, there's a short season for hunting, probably a debate for another evening, but yes, they do get hunted. They stand probably between 1.7 and 2 meters tall, 5'5" to 7 feet. So they are they're big. They're big animals. They weigh between 100 kilos and 350 kilos. And they are Europe's largest land mammal, on an equal footing with the polar bear. generally hibernate between October and April. And the females have 2 or 3 cubs in that time, in that period, and then the cub will stay with the female for about a year before moving on to their own territory. Have a varied diet, berries, insects, carrion, etc. But I still wouldn't want to meet one in a forest on my own outside. It needs 20,000 calories per day to live and to survive. So it eats a lot. Does the brown bear. What I'm going to show for the next few slides are some of my favourite shots that I got from that trip. Some of the photos have a story to them. Some don't. Some I'm just going to post for your enjoyment. Like I say, some have a story that I'll tell that tale as we come to them. So this was the first bear that I saw when I was in the hide. You go into the hides at around about 5 o'clock in the evening, and you stay overnight because bears are essentially nocturnal animals. But because of the fact that we were there in the summer, it was pretty much daylight, so you had the opportunity to take photos normally without too much problem. Now, this was the first bear that I saw. Like I say, for the first 2 nights, I didn't see a single bear. And on the 3rd night I was in the hide, this bear turned up. For an animal of its size, and this is a big male, being somewhere in the region of about 350 kilos, they move silently. When I first saw this bear, I had actually looked out of my hide window and he wasn't there. I turned around to get something out of my camera bag, so I actually dipped my head below the window level where I was looking out to grab something out of my bag. And when I turned around, he was there, stood probably some 15-20 meters in front of my hide. I never heard him arrive. He was so silent for an animal of its size. This is another big male that came through the area, and we did find a pair. This is a male and a female on a misty morning, just wandering through, just having a wander through the forest and past the vegetation. Again, this is a female that turned up. The advantage of going in June time was the cotton grass was in full bloom, so they blended nicely and formed very nice backdrops to the photos with the forest. Another small female, a young female that came and had a bit of an investigate of the area. Like I say, the cotton grass being in full bloom lends itself to a nice backdrop. Some of the hides overlooked a lake, and that gave the opportunity for reflection shots. So this was a female bear wandering along the shore of one of the lakes. Some reflection shots worked better than others, but this nearly worked. There must have been some ripples on the lake which didn't quite make it glassy smooth, but you get the idea of what we could have achieved. Another reflection shot there. Again, this is a female that came into the area to look at what was on offer. Now, this bear is running. This is a youngster. This is a young bear who had actually came to investigate the food boxes that were out. What goes into the food boxes is a mixture of like suet, fat, fish, etc. Placed in a box which the bears can open with their paws and flip the lids open. This youngster came to investigate one of the bait boxes. He's actually running away because he managed to flip the bait bait box open, exposing the food that was in it, and he was actually scared away by a flock of seagulls. So he is the wimpy bear that I saw that on that week. Yeah, so he's being chased away by a flock of lesser blackback gulls that wanted the food more than he did. One of the bears that did come up, a very unique individual, was this youngster. And this youngster is what's known as a blonde bear. It's virtually white, and it's a very, very unique bear. And this bear came around a number of the hides that we were in. She was absolutely beautiful, really photogenic, really, really unique. Very curious, very investigative behavior that she had around the area, but she was quite timid as well, which was an interesting sight. But she does tend herself to go to black and white. This was one of the shots that I took and then edited it in black and white. I think it worked well for me. I also did another shot in black and white that I converted, which is a young female walking along the edge of the lake just to see what it looks like. I think it looks nice in that way. Now, this is a huge male, and this was taken on mine last night. I very nearly didn't go out into the hide on my last night, because it would my last night meant leaving the centre the following morning at 8 o'clock, straight back to the airport. But at very last minute, I decided I would book a space in a hide and go out. I very nearly regretted it, because from 5 o'clock until the early hours of the morning, I didn't actually see a single bear. And then all havoc broke loose. At about 4 a.m, this huge 350 kilogram male bear decided to come wandering through the area. I had actually packed most of my camera gear away. I was so frustrated at the point that I'd not seen anything that evening, that I wasn't actually prepared for him coming through. But he was big. This was probably the biggest male bear that I saw all week. And you can see how close they get to wandering through the area. All these hides were occupied by other photographers and people bear watching. He just came wandering through as nonchalantly as you like at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Some of the hides give you the opportunity to get some backlit shots. So this was me shooting into the sun and getting a backlit shot of a bear. This was actually the same night, and after the big male bear had gone through and wandered on round other areas, this second bear came through probably about half an hour later. Now, the thing with this last night was we all had to leave the hides at 7 o'clock in the morning, and these bears were still wandering through the area at 6. So it was a little bit of a nervous time thinking about getting out of the hide and wandering back through the forest to the centre for breakfast, thinking we were about to become a bear's breakfast. But it was interesting. But they disappeared. They soon disappeared. As soon as people are around, they're actually quite nervous despite the size. But it was an interesting consideration wandering around at 7 o'clock in the morning. Now, it's not just bears that we get in this particular area. We get foxes. This fox came to visit one of the lake hides just to see what was going on. It caught me by surprise, hence it's probably not the best photograph that I took that week, but it just gives you an indication of some of the other mammals that are around. Now, the other mammal that we saw, I got very, very brief views, is this chap. This was a distant view that I got on a fleeting glimpse on the other side of a lake from one of the lake hides. But then on the last evening, after the big bears came through, unbelievably, this chap just walked straight in front of my hide. For those wondering what that is, it's a wolverine, and it's the closest encounter that I got with this particular animal. The biggest mustelid species that there is, so essentially it's a big weasel, but they're actually probably more dangerous and vicious than the bears are. They can be they have quite a bit of an attitude and can cause a few problems. So this Wolverine wandered in front of my hide, and then he was off, and that was it. That was all I saw, and that was the closest encounter I got with a Wolverine all week. But it was such a wonderful opportunity to see. It was a stunning animal that turned up. It's not just bears, wolverines. There are other animals now. In terms of what I shot during the week, the wolverine picture there is my last photo that I'm going to show you. The next few photos I've included in the presentation. I've been given kind permission by the photographer who took them to include them. They're not my shots because I didn't actually see any of these in the whole week that I was there. I think one person saw a fleeting glimpse of what I'm about to show you whilst we were there all week. And that's this chap. This is another of the boreal animals that are in the area. The photographer that took this said that he and his companion have spent many hours in the boreal forests of Finland, this particular centre, many hours, and the amount of time that they spent with the wolves in the area is minimal. I think it's something that they want to spend more time on. But I'm grateful to Kyle for lending me these photos, for including in tonight's presentation. I'm just going to show you 2 or 3 photos that he's taken. This, I believe, he told me, was a female that wanders through. Just a wider angle shot there for the end. Would I go again? Well, most definitely. I've got some unfinished shots that I want to take that I didn't get the opportunity to take, and I'm hoping to be heading back there next year to try and take some more photos. Hopefully heading back in the summer, in August, September time. August, September time is when the cubs come out, so there may be a better opportunity for cubs. And I'd love to be able to see these wolves, but I know, and I'm hoping that my chances are limited, but we hope to get them. Hopefully that gives you a flavour of what's available. I probably wouldn't go out there again on my own. Staying in the hide was very hard because you were literally in overnight, and it was difficult staying awake sometimes because you're in the hides from 5 in the evening until 7 in the morning. I probably wouldn't go again on my own. I'd take a companion so that we could run shifts. So while one sleeps and others watching, and we can wake each other up. It was such a fantastic opportunity to go out and see something different. So yeah, thank you for listening. For more information about the site that I went to, there's the website there. It's bearcentre.fi. There are the chaps the lads that lent me the wolf photos do run guided tours out to Finland. They're known as bearphoto.co.uk. I said I'd include the details for lending me the photos, but they're 2 young lads. They're only in their mid to late 20s. I have met them on a couple of occasions, and they actually gave me some invaluable advice whilst I was out there as well. Looking, if everybody wants to have a look me up, I'm on social media. You can see other things outside of Finland on my social media pages and on my website. Hopefully that's given you a flavour of what's available and what's photographable out in the boreal forests of Finland. Definitely somewhere I'd go back again. So yeah, thank you for listening tonight. Hopefully that's been an interesting webinar for you all. Any questions?
Thanks, Richard. Indeed, it has. And yes, I'd invite people to put their questions into the Q&A if you have any, please. While people are doing that, I've one or two myself. So but before questions, Richard, just lovely to see that contrast of some of the species that are really familiar to us here. And then the contrast of bears and wolves around in the woods as well. So lovely to see all that. Thank you. I'd be interested a bit more about the centre that's there. Sort of, do they provide more than just incidental feeding of the wildlife, or are they there because it's a hotspot? It just, you know, in the vastness of the boreal forest, why is that centre there, and how does it have access to such great wildlife?
I don't, to be honest, Jeff, I don't know how it started. It's a local Finn that decided to a nature lover that just noticed that the bears were there. The bears that come through, from my understanding, is that they're actually part of the Russian population. So they actually come through on a they just wander through. So the centre itself is the only building there. So it must have been a wildlife watcher. Could even, in the past, it could even been, I suppose, it could even been a hunter that was looking out for them. But it just seems to be a bit of a hot spot for them. Like I say, from my understanding from talking to the guys that work there, that these tend to come through from the Russian side of the border and just wander through. The amount of feeding that they do is very, very minimal, to be fair. Like I say, I tend to shy away from baited hides. I don't like it over here. But this, obviously, because of the size of the animal, you've got no real choice. It's not something that you'd want to be wandering through a forest and come face to face with a 350-kilogram male bear.
And what would the natural diet be of the bears and some of the other creatures that you showed us? Okay,
so the bears, as I said, it's carrion, nuts, fruit. The wolves would eat. They're hunters, they're carnivores, obviously, so they eat. There's a lot of moose and reindeer around the area as well. And the wolverine, I think, is a bit of a scavenger too. Typical mustelid diet, so mainly meat, but then they'll also eat fruit and nuts as well.
And were there other mustelids around? I mean, are there pine martens in the woods there, or badgers?
Not that I was aware of. Not that I was aware of. But certainly the wolverine was probably the only mustelid that I saw anyway.
Okay. And the male versus female bears, do you tell them apart just by size or build, or?
Yeah, the females are very, very small, very, very, very slight. They've got this is on the screen in front of me. This is a female here, so she's got more pointed ears. The males are much bigger, much more muscular in terms of body shape. They seem to be sleeker in terms of coat as well.
Okay, thank you. And Ellie asks that she thinks bears have a good sense of smell. Are they aware of people in the hides, but accustomed to them?
They probably are aware. They probably are. I didn't think they were, but they probably are. The centre asks you not to wear anything strong smelling. They also ask you not to spray insect repellent around, even though the mosquitoes were decided to make a meal of everybody. But they do ask you not to spray anything strong smelling. But yes, they probably are aware that you're in there.
And just in terms of sort of bear species, you mentioned the size of these European brown bears compared to the polar bears. Is there a relationship with the American grizzly, or do they hybridize further north with the polar bears? Or
they don't hybridize. They don't get that far north. They don't hybridize. The European brown bear and the American grizzly bear are, if I get this right, speaking to my zoologist son, they're the same genus. So they're essentially the same species.
Okay, thank you. And then on a different track, you mentioned, I think, about hearing a flycatcher, but it may have been a different species.
No, we heard red flank bluetail in the forest where we shot the great grey owl, or we were taking photographs of the great grey owl. There was a single red flank bluetail.
And was that a common issue, that you could hear birds but couldn't see the birds for the trees?
In the forest, yeah. Once you got into the depths of the forest, yeah, it was very, very difficult to actually see, particularly the smaller species, because they tended to spend a lot of time deep in the trees or high up in the trees.
Okay, thank you. And a number of people rightly have commented on how beautiful the photos are. And there's a question: is this a place you had always wanted to go? You said it was a chance encounter that made it possible. And did you learn anything new related to photography on the trip?
I wanted to set myself a little bit of a challenge. I'd been researching for about a year to go to somewhere to look for something a little bit different to what I was getting photographs of in the UK. So I'd been looking at in the year prior to going to Bird Fair, I'd been looking at going to different places where brown bears were, or for different bigger European mammals. And when I was at the Bird Fair, the bear centre people, being a typical Yorkshireman, they were offering a really good deal. So I jumped at the chance to spend a week with them. I'm glad I went with them, to be honest, because I know I keep mentioning about the putting the food out, but it was minimal. I've been talking through organising this bear trip. I got talking to another photographer friend of mine through Facebook, who at the same time had gone to a different site in Finland, and he said he was really disappointed, because he said it was just like a zoo, because the bears were just waiting for people to come in to get to the hide to sit and feed them, which was a bit disappointing. This place was really responsible, I think. There was minimal food put out. Like I say, for the first 2 nights, I didn't see a single bear. They just didn't come. So they were just wandering the vastness of the area. In terms of photography, it was a way of experimenting with different types of shot, different styles, because there are about 30 different hides. You can get a different perspective. So quite a lot of the hides overlooked water, so you could get the reflection shots, like I say. Some of the hides faced into the sun, so you could do backlit shots. There were other hides that actually were in the forest, so you could follow the bears coming through the forest track. And because I was there for a solid week, it was just a matter of experimenting and trying different styles and seeing what worked.
Excellent, thank you. And the last question before we hand back to Helen, it's just around the forest themselves. Are they logged or just completely left to their own devices, which you'd think would leave a good bit of deadwood?
From where I was, I didn't see any evidence of logging. I'm sure it goes on, and I mean, I'm sure the fact that there is all this forest is it's an industry in Finland. But certainly where we were, there was no evidence of logging. But yeah, it was just natural forest.
Thank you.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Thanks for that, Richard. Really illuminating. So I'll
Yeah.
pass you back to Helen.
Thanks, Jeff.
Well, thank you so much, Richard. What an absolute treat to see all those incredible photographs. I mean, people have been commenting in the chat how beautiful they were, quite rightly, because especially I thought the black and white ones of the bears were absolutely fantastic, completely stunning. I myself really enjoyed seeing the redwings, you know, in song and with fledglings, in, you know, a way that we never see them in this country.
Absolutely,
that was really lovely to see.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, a whole different side of them that yeah, you sort of forget must be there.
Yeah.
So that was wonderful. But I suppose the highlights were those incredible the mammals, you know,
the mammals were just incredible,
just astounding, you know, those huge lumbering bears and the wolverine as well, just absolutely phenomenal. But I tell you what, I would have missed my plane. I don't think I would have come out to catch it with all those bears around. They do look really quite frightening, especially that huge male that appeared towards the end.
Yeah, it was a big beast.
Yeah, no, absolutely terrifying. But thank you so much, Richard. It was a you know, a real experience to be able to, you know, share that trip with you. So thank you very much for coming, and I hope you'll come again once you've done the next trip, and show us again what you've seen.
Yeah, thank you.
Just before we finish, let me just remind people about the next talk, which is going to be, I think, in 2 weeks' time, on the 7th of December. And that is going to be a joint meeting with the Yorkshire Rewilding Network, I believe. And we're going to have Tim Mackerel, who's going to talk about the return of the white-tailed eagle. So that will be something to look forward to. Sadly, I shall myself miss that one. I'm not quite sure who's it. Are you introducing that, Jeff?
It'll be myself and another trustee from the Yorkshire Rewilding Network. And I did mean just to emphasise to people, when Jenny sends the link out, it is free, but you do need to register before that one, not just join at the time. So it's still a Zoom thing, just like this, but please go and register with the link that Jenny will send out later this week or next week.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks very much for that clarification. Okay, well, it only remains for me to say good night. And if you know of anyone who missed tonight's talk, who might have liked to watch it, I believe it's been recorded, and you'll be able to see it later on our YouTube channel, and also the website. Thank you.